So right now we're joined by Bryan Bedford with Recruit Route. And so Bryan, if you could just kind of give our listeners kind of what it is that Recruit Route does and just kind of the history of it.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me. Excited. You've had a bunch of my buddies on here before on different interviews, so that's really cool. I guess I'll start with this. I mean, my background is I'm kind of a 25-year veteran of the world of recruiting and tech and media, and have kind of lived in that space for a long, long time. And was a Division I recruiting director at TCU, and started a Division II program, and was football operations and recruiting director way back in the day before many of you guys were around. And but when I got out of that and kind of transitioned to different aspects of sports and recruiting and all that fun stuff, people would just come up and say, my son wants to try to play college football or, basketball or baseball or whatever in college. It was as simple as that, right? Nothing magical, like guys, you guys age, like just a bunch of dads saying, hey, help my little son or help my daughter or whatever it was. And I actually, was just like, well, I don't know. I got a job and I'm busy and, all that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, maybe I can help a few people. And, I'd been on the other side of the fence of this thing. And I thought, well, I think I know some stuff that some other people don't know. So maybe I can start from there. And, given your Sooner ties, I actually went about 7 years ago to speak at an event with a friend of mine, JD Runnels, former fullback at Oklahoma. Yeah. And JD had me come over to one of his, he was at that time training a bunch of kids here in the metro area. And he had me come and speak. And I had a family that came up to me after the fact, and their son was getting ready to be a junior in high school at Mustang. And they said, we don't know what we're doing. We have no idea what level he can play at. We don't know where he should go. We don't know how we should correspond with coaches. We don't know any of this stuff. And I said, well, I think I can help you. Why don't we meet at Panera and let's go? And that's how it started. I mean, it was as simple as that. And Recruit Route's just taken off. It's certainly got more complicated the last couple of years with COVID and the transfer portal and NIL and all that kind of stuff. But that's kind of the short version of how we got here. So it's been a fun ride.
Lost you for.
Did you lose me?
Yeah, we're good now. Good. We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, Bryan, you kind of touched on it where things have changed more recently with the transfer portal. I'm just curious as far as how that has impacted maybe some high school recruits, kind of with just more colleges taking more people in the portal as opposed to high school recruits.
Yeah, I think it, certainly if you talk to a recruiting director, they're going to tell you they're holding back about 25% of their available roster spots for kids in the portal than they would high school kids. So I think, naturally you're seeing a little bit of that. That's at the very highest level, though. I mean, that's really Division I football. As you go down, that doesn't necessarily ring true. I mean, there's certainly, Division II and FCS, they were always taking kids in the transfer. I mean, that's normal. They were always taking bounce backs or kids transferring. But I think in the, kind of major college Division I area that I think you guys are kind of focused in on today, yeah, they're holding a couple of spots back. But they're also doing that because they know that kids are going to leave their own program too, right? So, if you look at most rosters, that bottom kind of 10 to 15% of the roster, it kind of naturally evolves. Those kids that are in the bottom kind of 10 or 15% of the roster that are there, it's probably a reach for them. For whatever reason, it wasn't a fit. Either they're not athletic enough, the academic is difficult, they maybe have some other thing that's happened in their lives that you don't know about. So you're always going to have kind of that. And then you're always going to have kind of the mark, there's always the 1% situation where you have like this star kid that wants to transfer for whatever reason, right? The Jalen Hurts kind of situation where those kinds of things. But the majority of the kids that you're seeing actually go into the portal are actually kids that weren't playing. They just want to go somewhere and play. And so no, I like to play sports, and I like to play when I was, back in the day. And so I can't blame them for wanting to go somewhere. And so, yeah, I mean, they certainly are kind of, trying to manage to that and trying to figure it out. But that's a big number. I mean, you don't want to be building your roster out of the portal. You want to be complementing it, and you want to be augmenting your roster. And most of those guys, they're going to tell you they certainly want to be knee deep in the high school recruiting space. So, while it doesn't have an impact, if you're building your roster, there are certain situations where you want to go a little heavier, but I would say, if you're talking about an SEC or a Big 12 or a Pac-12 or Big 10 or ACC program, you need to do really well with player development and recruiting high school kids. Like, that's still got to be your bread and butter. And then there's just going to be the natural ebb and flow now, where, the bottom of your roster is going to try to find another place that they can play at, and you're going to need to backfill and find new players.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Bryan, once again, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
And so I want to know, because I'm not really familiar with Taylor Heim. So we know that he signed with OU, but could you kind of just talk about his story?
Yeah, no, it's a good one. And Taylor's been a fun kid to kind of work with for a couple of years. His mom and dad came to us almost 2 years ago, to be honest with you, Jackson. And it was, kind of similar to the story that I kind of described earlier, right? We need help. We don't know what we're doing. We think our son's a pretty good player, but we have no idea where that, lines up. As a junior at Bethany, it's a 4A school, just, right in the Oklahoma City metro area. Taylor played quarterback and receiver there. They would go with kind of a platoon quarterback regime, and they did that his senior year as well. And then he would play at receiver. And so you had kind of this interesting junior film, can see he's athletic. Didn't really know exactly what he ultimately would kind of evolve into. Thought he probably projected as a tight end with his height. He's a true 6'5". Wow. And so I know there's been some Twitter debate on that. He's a legit 6'5" kid. He's super tall. I'm 6'2", and I'm dwarfed by him. I mean, he's so much bigger than me. But so could kind of see, okay, he's got some measurables, and we kind of know the profile of measurables the schools are looking for. And so then we got to spring of his junior year, and I always encourage kids to play multiple sports. Absolutely don't specialize. And he didn't. He ran track, which I don't think he was a big fan of, but it helped him immensely. He joined the Bethany track team and went and won 3 state titles as a junior. He won the 4x1, he ran the 4x2, and he and with about 3 or 4 weeks before the state championship, his coaches decided, hey man, you're pretty athletic, why don't you try to figure out how to long jump? And so he wins an individual long jump title. And so there's definitely some correlations that you can see with track times and long jump and long jump distances, high jump heights, and shot, discus, javelin, all that stuff. There's very much correlations to how that works in the world of football recruiting. And so he started to get on some radars. And so we went through the summer camp circuit last year, and started to, by the spring and certainly then the summer, he started getting a bunch of kind of Division II interest. He went to a bunch of camps, but the big guys, he didn't really fit a box, which kind of hurt him because nobody knew what he was. Yeah. And so the label athlete can work for you, but it also can work against you. And in Taylor's kind of case, he was 6'5" and 190 pounds. And so you had to kind of project, is he going to be 230? Or is he going to be, like a slow receiver at 6'5"? Like, what was he going to be? And so a lot of people were intrigued, okay, this is interesting. And so he started getting some we went through camp and started to get some like FCS offers, like South Dakota State and folks like that started to show great interest in him. And then his senior year came around and he'd put all this work in and he really kind of stuck to kind of the script of things that we recommend our kids do. And, we always tell kids, get your first 3 games of film out. And I had seen his first game and he'd run like a pick 6 back, like it was 108 yards against maybe John Marshall or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay, this looks a little different now that he's on defense. Mm-hmm. And so his defensive film really helped him immensely. You could start to see explosiveness in a different way. You could see his length. He's got super long arms, and you could see that height really coming through. And then he's kind of sitting behind, a lot of success as a junior, 3 state championships, a bunch of camps, all that kind of stuff. And so then we got into kind of, really making a push and, went through kind of the middle of the year, and it was Navy. It's kind of got a big offer from Navy, and they thought, okay, here we go. And then it was Army right after that. And then it was Air Force. And so a lot of those guys work together. I mean, they kind of work in unison. They follow each other really closely on the kids they're recruiting. And I thought, okay, well, we got a little something here. And then had a bunch of, the Yales and the Browns and, the Ivies and some of those kind of guys. It wasn't until we got to late November, and then Ohio had offered, and it's like, okay, we got a MAC school. Like, okay, we got like a legit Division I school that isn't one of the academies. So you kind of take it in progress, right? And then I had a good buddy at La Tech that I coached with when I was at TCU, and I called and said, hey man, I've got a kid I think you need to take a look at. Like, I think he could fit for you guys. And he actually came up to Oklahoma City and was like, yeah, I like that kid a lot. And then they offered him, and I thought, okay, we're playing with house money now. Like, here we go. Yeah. And then after that, I sent a text on December the 14th. I could show it to you guys, but you'll just have to take my word for it. I sent a text to a couple of members of the OU staff that I know, and I said, hey, I got a kid here that you just need to take a look at. Like, I'm not saying he's an offer kid, but I just want you to take a look at him. Because it's really not my job to tell him whether or not he's an offerable kid. That's their job, right? But I just sent him a text and I said, hey, just pass this kid along. Like, and he's got enough senior film that's intriguing to me that I don't think you've seen. And that was on December 14th. Like, a lot of people think it's magical, but literally it was December 14th, because I knew that he needed to have enough offers in tow, or it really didn't make sense. And at that point in time, he had just visited Ohio and, had loved it, thought it was great. And we basically made the decision that we weren't going to sign early. I just had a gut experience will tell you this. And I just felt like, okay, I don't think that you need to sign early. I think you need to wait because you'd only been on one official visit. So why don't we come back and you can take your official visit to La Tech at that point in time on Martin Luther King weekend. And then, you can go to Air Force, and those were kind of the 3 main ones at the time. It was Ohio, Air Force, and La Tech. And so we kind of planned those out the first couple of weeks when we got back from Christmas break. And I actually went to, this is the part that not a lot of people know. So, Sooner Surge will get a little bit of a scoop here, is that I actually went to the Oklahoma Coaches Convention in Shawnee. And I got a phone call from North Texas the day before Taylor was going to La Tech. And I said, guys, like, I think I've got one here that can play for you. And, he's been to your camp. He really likes your campus at North Texas. And at this point, I'm thinking, man, like, if he got a North Texas offer, that kid needs to do backflips. Like, this is great, right? And I said, but listen, man, if you're going to get in the game, like, I need you to get in the game tonight, because I want him to think about, I want him to think about North Texas on a 7-hour drive to Ruston, Louisiana, because he's got to drive through Denton to get to Ruston, Louisiana. Mm-hmm. And they offered him that night. And in the middle of that, there was also one other thing, is that I get to Shawnee for the coaches convention, and I happened to run into Steve Spurrier Jr. and Kevin Wilson, the new offense coordinator at Tulsa, and Kevin Wilson, new head coach at Tulsa. And I happened to run into those guys in the reception. And I said, you guys, welcome to Oklahoma, welcome back. I know you don't know from anything, but I have a kid here that I think, could be a fit. At this point, like I'm playing with house money. Like, hey, I got nothing to lose. Like, it's a in-state kid, long, great film. And they called him on the spot with me sitting there. And they didn't even know really much about, I mean, they were like, where does he play? What position? I'm like, well, I don't know. He's going to be a something. I'm not sure what he's going to be. And then I ended up seeing the OU staff that night at the same event. And I said, hey, like, I think Tulsa's going to pull the trigger, and which they ended up doing. And at that point in time, OU had said, yeah, we at this point, the OU stuff had kind of picked up. They'd already offered him a chance to come and walk on, and we had politely declined that and said, thank you, but no thank you. We weren't interested in that. And yeah, I mean, a couple days later after that whole deal in Shawnee, I get a phone call from Taylor's dad and he says, yeah, Brent Venables just FaceTimed me like 5 minutes ago out of the blue right before my basketball game. I nearly, messed himself up, just was totally surprised by the FaceTime. And then he basically told Taylor, like, listen, I'm not calling about walking on. I'm calling like about something more than that, but we got to do our homework about you. And the rest is history. So it's a pretty cool story, man.
Yeah, that's really a great story. Venables followed it up that night by attending the game. That was really where I realized, okay, this Taylor Heim thing it's for real. Like, to make the offer and then attend the game, like in Kiefer, Oklahoma. Like, who would have thought Brent Venables out in Kiefer? And really, really glad he's a Sooner. I really appreciate what you did for him to get him in the Crimson and Cream. But he's not the only athlete that you have going to OU. Jacob Schneider's another one. Can you tell us a little about him?
Yeah, Jacob's, his family's one that I've known for several years. Worked with his older brother that ended up kicking at Pitt State, and he'll be a senior there at Pitt State, and has had a great, career. Both his older brother was at Wagner, and then went on to Pitt State. And then, we knew we would do the same kind of thing. And I kind of I'm a glutton for habit, when you've done this a long time, you've got a rhythm to the way that you handle recruiting. And I have certainly a big network of coaches that I've known for a long, long time, and knew Jacob was a really, really good player. Had kind of followed him and his, obviously with his older brother for a couple of years, and could kind of see him having success early. He had a bunch of success in wrestling, which is really, he's going to be, he'll be once again one of the top wrestlers in the state of Oklahoma in the 165 class. And so you could kind of see some things with Jacob that were really interesting. Unfortunately he's a little altitude challenged. He's not the tallest guy in the world. And so we knew that it was about fit and trying to find, a situation for him. He actually probably was recruited faster, much faster than Taylor was, in the context of, you're at a school like Bixby, who, has had just tons of success in this state and across the borders. And so a lot of people knew him because they were coming through Bixby with all of the talent that was there with Coach Montgomery and staff. And so we got through the spring, and he had a handful of offers, and places like Navy and Air Force, and a bunch of really good Division II offers like Pitt State and UCO and Emporia, and just a bunch of those kinds of schools. Started to have some, kind of FCS schools that were interested in him. And candidly, I thought, I thought, well, maybe he is going to be kind of one of those academy kids, kind of fits the profile. He's exactly what they're looking for, kind of, fitting into their program. But at the end of the day, Jacob was, certainly grew up a Sooner fan.
Mm-hmm.
Mom and dad have been to a jillion Sooner games in life. He's got a girlfriend at OU as well. That never hurts. And wanted to stay close to home. And, that's really important. And as a parent, I can totally appreciate, kids, not want, there's certainly a bunch of kids that are like, hey, I want to go to Hawaii to college. But, I certainly appreciate those kids that are like, I want to stay close to home and be close to my kind of family unit and family and all that kind of stuff. And so it was really the week before the state championship game. They started to engage with Jacob, started following him on Twitter and asked a couple questions. And Coach Hall and Coach Venables just, said, he had been down there a little bit on some game day visits, but it started to really pick up. And, I think if you look at their success at the slot receiver, one of the other kids that we worked with last year is Gavin Freeman, and that was one of our kids too, right? So, it kind of fits that. Drake Stoops, Gavin Freeman, like he fits that inside slot receiver spot. And they've got a couple other kids that they brought on kind of in that same mold. Like, we're going to bring you in as a, preferred walk-on. Drake was a preferred walk-on, then on scholarship. Gavin preferred walk-on, then on scholarship recently. So I think they're trying to find, a something here to where they give those kids that, maybe don't quite have the measurables, but have a lot of the intangibles to come on their roster. So couldn't be more thrilled for Jacob and the Schneider family. Like, just good, great family and great fit for them. And that's the right situation. You find the right spot that's home, man, you got to go for it. Bet on yourself.
Yeah, with Jacob, I mean, I first played against him, first grade INFC football, and all the coaches, him and Fugate from Bixby, are like, those kids they're going to be D1 football players. And I really appreciate stuff that you do with the players that are overlooked and getting them to that level, because in my opinion, like the PWO, there's so many talented players that just aren't given the opportunity. So really appreciate what you're doing for those guys.
Yep. I actually go to school with them, and I'm a junior, so I'm a year younger, but I've watched them play through high school. I'm like, there's no way that they shouldn't at least get a look by OU. They're so talented players. So, but once again, I want to say, just like Hunter, I appreciate your work with them.
Yeah. No, it's fine. I mean, every kid's got to find the right fit for them. And sometimes walking on or taking an opportunity like that is the right fit. In many situations, it's not, so it's a balance between, finding the right opportunity for you and the right opportunity for your family. Financially, there's implications. So there's a lot that goes into it. But for those kids that, have the opportunity to bet on themselves financially, them and their family can deal with those situations, then, it can be a really good situation. At the same time, there's risk, right? Because, you may never play at such an elite program, whether it's Oklahoma or Alabama or Clemson or Notre Dame. And so you have to weigh those things. But that's all part of the process of kind of consulting with them and their parents and trying to find the right situation that makes the most sense for them.
Yeah, I'm Brian. I coach track in Sapulpa. I'm one of the track coaches there. And so I saw the tweet about the NFL Combine, a 63%er, I think something was the number of track and field. And you talked about earlier about not specializing in one sport. That is very encouraging to hear, because there's so much specialization now at younger ages. So maybe talk a little bit about why you think multi-sport athletes are so important.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, we could have one whole, maybe we should have another podcast on just this topic alone. I mean, it's such an important one, but I mean, Jeremy, competition is so important, and I don't care what you're in. I don't care if it's tiddlywinks. I don't care if it's playing horse in your front yard. I don't care if it's, lining up 11 on 11 or in a track meet or whatever. Like, go compete and show people that you can go win. And I think it shows a lot about kind of the character and so forth. The other part of it is that, especially in track, well, I'll give you a couple of examples. So, in track, we can obviously do correlations, and you know this, being a coach, we can do correlations to athletic movement. And, in Taylor's situation, I'll give you a funny story. I'll give you a story about track, and I'm going to give you a story about wrestling for both the two kids that you asked me about. So in track, somewhere 24/7, even though I don't think Taylor ever ran the open 100, he only ran on the relays. Somewhere out there, 24/7 put a track time of 11:25 on his profile. And I don't think he ever ran the 100 meters, okay? But before La Tech was going to offer him, Coach Cumby and the defensive staff there who were evaluating him, they wanted to make sure that we got verified numbers, track numbers, and we got verified camp numbers. So we literally went back. I called all the places that he camped at, and I went back to and got his track times, and we sent them verified track data because they wanted to see the correlation of his jumps and his runs, okay, before they made the offer. And it was all based on track, okay? So, I mean, you don't think track is important, man? I mean, that's a perfect example. Mm-hmm. Secondly, when Jacob went on his visit to Navy, Brian Newberry, who's now the head coach at Navy, is a good personal friend. We went to high school together at Westmore. He was a defense coordinator. He was the Oklahoma recruiter. When Jacob came up, he's like, "Hey, Jacob's up here today." I was like, "Yeah, I know." I was like, "Take care of him." And he said, "Tell me what you know, any character issues, what's mom and dad like, yada, yada, the normal thing that coaches ask for." And I said, "Hey, by the way, he wrestles, right?" He's like, "I didn't know that." I was like, "Yeah, he'll be like top 5 in the state probably." And he goes, "All right, done deal. We're going to offer him." I mean, guys, like I'm just telling you, playing more sports, and if you are an elite athlete at those levels, it makes a big difference. I tell my wrestlers, I'll give you one from last year as well. I had an O-lineman from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and he was about 6'6" and 300 pounds, and he probably was too heavy at camp. He probably went to camp in the summertime at about 315, 320, and it was just too big. Just didn't run real well, didn't look athletic. But I said, no, we're going to, football season's over. He was down to about 300. I said, "What are you going to wrestle at?" He's like, "I'll probably wrestle at 295, 300. I said, "Okay." Then I want all of those wrestling matches, you in heavyweights, I want you in a singlet on film. And so we started putting out his wrestling footage on social media, and people could see his body type. People could see him moving. People could see how he used leverage as an O-lineman. And so I love for my linemen to wrestle, or throw the shot, or throw the disc, right? Because they need to be doing something else besides just, working pass pro in February. Like, they need to be doing something else. So Jeremy Camp, I'm a huge multi-sport guy. Like, it's absolutely critical to do it. So I'm your #1 fan, brother.
That's awesome.
Hey, Bryan, one thing, I mean, it's so encouraging to just hear what you do at Recruit Route, because I can only imagine all that's involved with the recruiting process. And now you throw in NIL and everything else. I mean, what as far as NIL do you help? Is it just kind of just help you're the kind of in person in between to kind of help figure all that out? I mean, I'm sure there's so much involved with everything.
Yeah, sure. Well, so so it's a great question. So, I mean, on the athlete side, certainly we've got our kids who, they've got we have a weekly newsletter that goes out to all the kids that we work with. They have an app that they can ask me questions, them and their mom and dad. They have tools they can use for recruiting. And so all of that stuff is kind of part of what we naturally do, consulting them. Like, if they were to bring me a deal, I'm reviewing it. I could review it with an attorney, like all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So we're really kind of, again, focused in on education and mentoring and things like that. My holding company, the Bedford Agency, which is kind of the holding company to Recruit Route, we consult with schools and school districts all across the country. So, we're the partner of record with the state of Oklahoma and the OSSAA. So I'm literally helped write the guidelines that impact youth sports and secondary education here in the state of Oklahoma. And then we're working with school districts across the state to educate their coaching staffs. So what does it mean for you? What can you do? What can't you do? What should you be telling your kids? What should you be telling your parents? And so we're educating coaches on recruiting and NIL literally all across Oklahoma, but naturally then, we were engaged in conversations, certainly Jason, all across the country. So a lot of stuff happening, but yeah, so we think of ourselves as really kind of at the cornerstone of educating in all of these areas: academics, recruiting, and certainly NIL. And we educate different stakeholders in different ways because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think with NIL, as far as maybe if someone's a PWO, but they can get NIL opportunities, do you think it's maybe helped people going on PWO now that they can maybe get an NIL opportunity to kind of help pay for scholarship fees and stuff?
Yeah, I think it does have an impact. You look at what Oklahoma's doing, where they're offering. So the answer is yes, and I'll talk about Oklahoma in just a minute. But if you step back, there's kind of two different ways that people are engaging in name, image, and likeness today. The first is directly one-on-one between them and a brand. And so, whether it's a local, regional, or national brand, majority of that is 80 to 90% of that is coming via social impressions and social media and things like that. Then you have the collective, which is basically crowdsourced fundraising through a nonprofit, to where those student athletes are working inside basically a nonprofit to give back. So they're volunteering their time. And so the money is in exchange for the time they're given. Instead of it being a job, now they've got to go to the soup kitchen or, whatever mission it is out there. And they're spending time there, that in return, they're getting a reciprocal fee for that, right? And so that's what you're seeing these nonprofit collectives happen. I think the cool part about it, and it really is, kind of dependent on how much the collective, how well it's organized and it's operated and managed, and how much they fundraise. If you can fundraise to a level where you can also include your walk-ons, that's a great thing. And it allows every kid to kind of be part of it. But independent of that, I always tell kids, don't plan on that. Like, I know that I think we've kind of felt like we've set a market trend for that. But if you really want to do something really special in the world of name, image, and likeness, then you need to be more active on social, and you need to be active and create more content that will then attract more followers, because in the college space, 80% of the transactions are coming off of social media influencing. So this idea of an influencer economy is really what's driving the large valuations that you're seeing some players get. It's just based on how many followers they have, because brands are coming saying, okay, that kid is, if you are 13 to 21, that kid is somebody that you guys look up to. And so he's got 30,000 followers. We want him to be a brand ambassador for our insurance agency or whatever it may be that's out there, right? The collectives are just, you've got to work for it. You got to go. There's tax implications if you don't. So you've got to be going to and volunteering or working at, one of these collectives in the nonprofit manner. If you're not, that's what's getting programs in trouble, right? When they're trying to fudge this type of stuff. But I think it's a great opportunity for all kids if the kids want to do it. So not every kid wants to do NIL. Not every kid wants to be part of that. And so the collectives are kind of a whatever. But when you really think about the true letter of the law, what name, image, and likeness is, like, not every kid, wants to do that, because you're literally running your own brand. You've got to think about what do you want to be? What brands do you want to associate with? What are you putting money back? Have you thought about taxes? Have you thought about legal constructs with agreements? Are you just doing trade? What are what all of that stuff looks very different. And so it's cool, but at the end of the day, not every kid wants to do that. Not every kid wants to go to an autograph session, or not every kid wants to go volunteer their free Saturday when you're, super intense, or not every kid wants to do a public speaking event. So there's certain kids that do, but there's a bunch of kids that are introverts that they're like, I have no interest in doing that. And so it's about finding the right setup and situation when it comes to NIL.
Bryan, so as we know, you've covered lots of players throughout your time since you really started a recruit route, do you maybe have a favorite story of a player that you've gotten to cover?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a couple. I have, the 2020 class was a pretty unique one for us. We had 2 U.S. Army All-Americans, and that doesn't happen very often.
No.
You're not going to have that. Cam Little, who's the place kicker at Arkansas, who's also my nephew, coincidentally, was one of them. And then Aiden Kelly, who is at Oklahoma State and will be competing for the starting spot this next year at defensive tackle. What a really unique situation to have 2 kids at that level getting recruited. Aiden came to me in January of his junior year, and we met at a Brahms out in like Kingfisher, Oklahoma, and with his mom and dad. And I had gotten tipped off about him from another former OU guy. Bronson Irwin played O-line at OU. Bronson had said, "Hey, I'm working out this kid, and he's got a shot. Like, I think there might be a something." And so I watched a little bit of film, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm coming to see you." There's not a lot of 6'3", 285-pound kids who can run. So I'm going to come to you. And so I literally went and got a scoop of ice cream and met him at a Brahms in Kingfisher, but after a basketball game. So, like, he's hot and sweaty and just whatever, ready to just mow on like 8 cheeseburgers at Brahms. And we just sat down and talked about it. And so from January to April, he went from 0 offers to 26 Division I offers in 3 months.
Wow, that's crazy.
It was like a rocket ship. I mean, he first called me and he was like, "Well, I got offered by Arkansas State. I don't even know what to do." And then it was Iowa State, and then it was like, "All right, well, Minnesota," and then it was Syracuse, and I go, "Do you know where Syracuse, New York is at?" She's like, "No, I got no idea where Syracuse, New York is at." And then it was East Carolina, and then it was Nebraska, and then Oklahoma State, and then on and on and on. And that was pretty cool because that was like a rocket ship. Like, it was 3 months, and then it was kind of done. Like, COVID hit, and he couldn't take a visit. He'd been to OSU a couple times, and then he'd been to OTCU. TCU offered him. Same guy who recruited Taylor Heim, by the way, and it was kind of between those two. And he's like, "Man, I'm a homebody. I just want to fish and hunt and hang around here. And I'm I got a bunch of friends that are going to Oklahoma State. I think I'm just going to go there." And I was like, "Perfect, man. Let's do it." And that's a pretty cool one. But to have him and Cam at the same time get named in that same class as U.S. Army All-Americans, that was pretty special. That doesn't happen very often. I don't know if I'll ever have 2 in one class, and partly because you've got to be recruited at an elite level so early. That's kind of how those nominations work. And that what's interesting out of that deal is Cameron, he was the first kid invited to, because he won the Coles kicking contest. So in the kicking world, you kick for your spot. Like, it's not selected. You kick to get in. And he got in through a kicking competition like January, a year before he early enrolled, but it was like a year before he early enrolled. So that was nuts, because you're like, he didn't even have any Division I offers. He had nothing. And you're like, you're just named an All-American. So anyways, those 2 are pretty darn special. I may or may not have a Hogs hat below me, and I may or may not have gone and called the Hogs a couple times this year with our family. But that one's pretty. Nice. Those 2 right there are pretty special for me.
Nice. Yeah, it's really good to hear.
But I'll say this. I talk a lot about the biggest recruits, and obviously they get a lot of notoriety. Man, I'm thrilled when a kid signs at Emporia. I'm thrilled when a kid signs at Oklahoma Baptist or Arkansas Tech or North Dakota State or UCO or Southern Nazarene. Man, I'm thrilled with that. I'm thrilled when kids find the right spot for them. I'll give you a couple on the girl side that I think are really interesting. I had a girl come to me a couple of years ago, and she was playing at Purdue and was really struggling on the soccer pitch and was considering transferring. And, freshman year was hard, and she was a super smart kid, like 28 ACT, 29 ACT, and 4-point whatever. And now she's at American University in Washington, D.C. and thriving and having success. And that's awesome, right? To find her a new home. Or I give you one that I love, a girl that is getting ready to go to Stephen F. Austin. She didn't play. She played at Aledo High School. Her name is Reagan Kracha. And she decided that she wanted to still play on the same club team that she had played on for a while, or similar club team. And in the world of soccer, one of the highest levels is what they call ECNL. And she had an opportunity to do that, but that was going to require her to have to do 2 or 3 days of an hour commute one way. And she's just like, I don't want to do that. That doesn't make sense, traveling that much in the DFW area, having a 2-hour commute, basically 3 or 4 days a week. She didn't want any part of that. And so she decided to play down a level, and still got a Division I scholarship. Why? She had a great video. She went to camp there. She communicated often. She did all the things that you would want a recruit to do. And there's even a cool video that's out from the coach at their signing day event a couple of weeks ago saying, we really weren't recruiting her, but she kept showing up. Mm-hmm. She convinced that she could play a different position. She, competed in different sports. She had great grades. She did all the things in communication she'd want. So all these big recruits get all the attention, but I love also the ones that you guys have never heard about and you won't ever hear about. Their stories are just as important because they needed as much help or more than the ones that are going to go to the OUs and OSUs out there.
Yeah, it's really good to hear those types of stories. That's really what you want to hear about. You want to hear about the little coveraged athlete that you helped get to to the next level. I mean, it's impressive, really. Do you guys do anything with baseball?
We do. We have a handful of baseball kids all across the country. We have. I had a kid in December sign with Mount Hood Junior College. Last year had one signed with Bishop State down in Mississippi, big 6'5", left-handed pitcher. We have a couple 24s and 25s right now. A couple in Kansas City that we're working with in the world of baseball. So baseball is a little different. The calendar shapes a little differently. The influx of the draft changes rosters. It's really would be probably the toughest to manage a roster in baseball than any sport. And then the influx of kids and dependency on the junior college ranks is very different. So, majority of kids that are going to a 4-year school, they're, the data now is that their path there is kind of through the junior college ranks, because you need reps, you need at bats, you need pitches, and you can't get that if you're sitting on the sidelines. And so, when you're dealing with a 35 to 40 man roster, you're going to need to get on the field. And so a lot of the ways that kids are doing that is kind of going through the junior college route. But I mean, if you're an elite kid, you're an elite kid that starts super early. If you're an elite kid in baseball, I mean, you're really by your 8th, 9th grade year, they've kind of pinpointed the major college kind of SEC, Big 12, Big 10 kids. And then if you kind of get past that, then you kind of are looking at your options. Mm-hmm. But there's plenty of them out there. The other piece of baseball is that you're dealing with, it's an equivalency sport. And so you don't have full scholarships. And so kids are dependent on, aid coming through either grants, loans, academic scholarships, or certainly some baseball. And so junior college gives you an opportunity to get some of that paid for, because they've got a bigger chunk of scholarships in junior college baseball than your Division I or Division II schools do. So we got kids in every sport. I mean, I've had powerlifting.
Oh, wow.
Track. I've had cross country. I had a kid sign Division II cross country this just a couple weeks ago. Certainly men's and women's basketball. We've got a bulk of football kids. So just about everything. It's all a little bit different. Like it's about like 80-20. Like there's a lot of the fundamental things that I teach in recruiting and communication and so forth that apply. but kind of your network and your, just the nuance of how you evaluate and what level they can play at are very, very different. Those things are different, but some of the basics are really the same. So it's kind of the 80-20 or 70-30 rule.
Yeah. Last question, Bryan, before we get off here. And I wanted to ask you about, hearing you for the first time. It's just very great and encouraging to kind of hear your heart. I know it's genuine, and you talked in your, I was doing some research on Recruit Route, and Christ-centered business, and
Yep.
we're all Christ followers on here. That's really attractive, I think, to see that. And I'm a father of 3 boys, and I know that if I'm looking for someone, if they ever had a chance to go to the next level, that's very attractive to see someone that's focused on Christ. So I'm just going to give you a minute or so if you wanted to talk about that aspect and being Christ-centered.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a huge part of it. I mean, we think about this, my wife and I, this is our ministry, like it comes out a little different. I'm not in a pulpit each week, but this is my ministry. I get to make an impact on kids and parents and families and coaches' lives. And so we certainly think about that. And, I'm certainly not a perfect person by any stretch of the imagination, but I think God's called me to help people in this way. And, that comes with a lot of, a lot of responsibility, but at the same time, I know that this is what, I'm supposed to be doing. I'm working on a session here, Jeremy, that I've got to speak at a couple of events here. And it's really about, kind of harnessing your passion into your purpose. And for me, I started being around sports, when I was 10 years old at a Final Four in 1986 in Dallas, Texas. And now to be 46 years old, and I really don't think I'm that old, guys. I'll be honest with you. I feel about 25. But to take my passion and be able to make it my purpose, that's really been pretty cool to do. And so, it's been fun. I mean, I never, I didn't know how all this was going to work out. I just knew I needed to work, super hard and, just keep grinding and, be around good people and surround yourself with good people, and then put Christ number one, is critically important.
Mm-hmm.
And, I grew up, I remember going to my first FCA event when I was, 13 years old, and that's that ministry of sport was just a big piece of who I was. It kept me plugged in. It allowed me to go to get a bunch of my school paid for at a Christian college. It's allowed me to raise, 2 teenage daughters now, and to, think about what we're doing as a family. So, man, it's not easy being a man of God and a person of faith, but that, just because it's not easy doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. So I'm certainly blessed to be here and blessed to have an awesome family, but, blessed to know that, God's really watched out for me and my family and watched out for what we're doing with the agency and Recruit Route. And he's blessed us, and he's blessed a lot of kids that we've been a part of through this ministry. So thanks for bringing that up, Jeremy.
Awesome, Bryan. Well, hey, once again, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. If you could just kind of give our listeners a way they can contact you, just kind of say that, and we'll close with that. So.
Yeah, sure. Well, probably the easiest thing is on the Twitter or Instagram or Facebook machine. Just type in Recruit Route or recruit_route. You can find it on all the kind of normal social channels that are out there. You can go to recruit-route.com or thebedfordagency.com for information there. And then you can send me a direct message on any of the social platforms, or you can just email recruitroute@gmail.com, and I'll check all those, and you can reach out anytime. If you got a parent or a family member that has questions around NIL, academic eligibility, or recruiting, or just want to talk ball, man, I'm here to talk. So let's go.
All right. Awesome, Bryan. Thanks again, man. Have a good rest of the day. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bryan.